Altid, vi kan begynde nu.
And very welcome. Now, I'm Bodil Engberg Pallesen, and live here in this small village. And but I work in the Danish Technological Institute in Denmark, which is a large institute, and I work in a division called Agrotech and with bioresources. But I have worked also as a local advisor for farmers, and I'm an agronomist of education. And I have worked actually with plant fibers and especially flax and very much hemp for more than 25 years. It's actually more. So, and it has been also now with a lot of other bioresources or waste materials also for, you would say, for companies. If they have some material, can we do something with it and develop new products? So, but this hemp, I have worked actually, you could almost say, with everything except I don't do with THC. Well, I have had a very small project with that, but it's the utilization, you could say, of the fibers, and also you could use seeds for food purposes or other things. But right now, it has been also, you could say, the whole value chain. You know, where you work from the field. So actually, I'm in charge of making all the cultivation plans. And that's due to my background when I was in the Farmers Union in here on Djursland. Here, and so it's this background, but also that it has come to be many new products. So the purpose has always been, what can you use the plant for, and can you make a business in it? Because actually the idea was that the farmers, they should have a new crop they could harvest and sell and be part of. And now you can see sustainability is really the issue is in these recent years more and more, and the climate and all this, and there you could say the hemp plant just fits so perfect in because it performs for so many purposes. But it started, many of the research projects I've had, that's actually been when I was in what we now call SEGES, but it has been the Farmer Union's advisory service where I have also worked quite many years. And then I was transferred to Agrotech and now Danish Technological Institute. So that has been to how to process it in new ways, the hemp, actually with hammer milling. That was back in the 90s where I built it up, a fiber processing unit at our research farm we have in Aarhus. Then it came in that I start working also processing it for these fibers that I got such woolly. You could say, well, it wasn't for textiles, but it was for a lot of industrial products. And then came in, if you could hand me the fiber mat in, that we could process the fibers in a new process, which is actually a non-woven technology, carding technology we call KAFT. And that actually became, as back in '98, a patent actually I took for making these fiber mats for insulation and for also for composites and so on. So it has been a long journey, and you could say, why don't we have thousands of hectares now? But it takes quite a long time to mature this, and then back in 2008 I got a corporation here which is close to where I live, to Møllerup Estate, where they contacted me, and it was actually I think even 2005. But in 2008 they actually started building up a pilot plant for this non-woven process for actually making hemp products. And that expanded and turned out to be, now they also process for fibers for all sorts of things, also textile waste and so on. And for some years ago, they separated. It was in one of the companies under Møllerup, which was called Advanced Nonwoven, whom I still cooperate with, who built it, this technology up, and it was based on my research, you could say. So, and then they also started a production where it was a production unit. They built it up in Thy, the northern part of Denmark, which is called Convert. So that's actually, I am, you could say, responsible for that because it's been on the top of my research work they have done there. And I have many projects with them. So some of the things we do now, that's actually to make these. Also, we work on a big project where it's to make, you could say, insulation material, which has been some of it, but it's also been for growth mat, it's been for making composites of various kinds. So there have been, you could say, many purposes in this work. And right now, it's some you can't tell details about because they're about to commercialize it, but we have got rather far. And you could say this technology, it can handle fibers when you have shortened them. So they are, normally you could have hemp fibers, really long, which they are from nature, but here you have cut them down to make these very, you could say, even fiber mats. And you can make in many thicknesses and densities and all this. But this was the part of the work, and the thing is you also have, which we can show later, when we go down in the field and look at how the hemp is growing, you have varieties where you grow for fiber purposes, you have some you grow for textile purposes. So I also have here got a very big research project where we look at new, you could say, make a complete new value chain for the textile purposes. Because the textile, that was formerly, we had flax for textile purposes up to the beginning of the 70s, but then we couldn't compete with Belgium and when we got in the European market there. So then the whole flax industry stopped at that time. We were actually pretty good in Denmark. So that's also when I took that up. That was also the purpose. Could you do anything but textiles? But now I'm also taking the textile purpose in. And that's really, really interesting because it has these unique fiber qualities. And you could say we make a new harvesting method where you have to paralyze the stems so you can process them, where you all the time keep the long length of it. So this is completely different from this perspective where you shorten them to make all these industrial products. But for textile, you could say there's very much interest in that because it's not very sustainable today, and you all the time look for a more sustainable production, and could be produced some here in Denmark or in the North Europe. I don't know if Iceland will be suitable for that, but at least how can you renew this value chain? So we look also at something called retting, the controlled retting, and that I can explain later. When you look at the stems, they have to lay on the field and change color. So you can remove the fibers which sits outside the stem. You have this long plant stem, but then you have the fibers sitting outside, so it's best fibers. And you can take them off. And you can do that if it has been out retted on the field. That we did with flax, and that you also need for hemp. Se, hvordan skæven ser ud. Altså, der har man jo rykket. Fiberne, de sidder jo udvendigt.
Ja. Og det er dem, man bruger?
Det er dem, man bruger. Og det er jo så dem, der bliver til alle de her ting, og det kunne blive til tekstil, ikke også?
Til tekstil og til tov og til hvad som helst.
Ja, og der kan man jo, nu sidder der jo lige sådan en masse belægninger på, så der er jo noget mere mekanisk processering inden, men det er det her, vi kan spinde garn af. Ja. Og det er så det, vi arbejder rigtig meget med. Og det er jo simpelthen skæven. Det er jo sådan helt en.
Og den bruges til?
Ja, det er jo den, der kunne bruges til det der hampebeton eller strøelse.
Ja.
Så I kan se, det er jo den måde. But then the industrial, they always ask for very even quality. So that's why we also have looked into a control rating process, where we have built it up, a pilot plant in cooperation with Aarhus University in Foulum. And actually I just made trials here on Friday, where we tested this. I have also some samples to show out there. And so this is a new product where we also look at, can you renew the process how you scud it. And scud it, that is to remove fibers, very high cellulose in content, from the wooden part, which is the inner part of the stem. If you look at wood, you have a complete different way of how a wood cell. If you should have cellulose out of wood, you would know that you have to cook it or make a pulping process. And that's to get lignin removed. But in flax and hemp, it's so practical, you can do it in a mechanical process. But so there's a lot to that. But in Europe, it has been flax you could grow for textiles and only very little of hemp. But it's coming more and more because the interest is there. But you haven't had an industry. You've had it in some of the eastern countries, but else they haven't been able to compete. And it's Eastern European countries like Romania. But else it's China mainly who produces all the hemp in the world for textile purposes. Long distance, you could say, not very sustainable process they do. And so that's also why the textile industry wants this very much. And you could say another good thing about all these fiber, they're so strong. So textile from hemp can last very much longer than other textiles. So it's also sustainable in that respect. So it's in many ways. And one good thing also you could say about when you grow hemp, you don't use, you can easily grow it organic because you don't use any pesticides also in the conventional production, because it competes very good with wheat, gets so high fast, and actually at our areas, in Denmark, you don't find pests actually haunting it. So it's a very good crop to grow, and if we grow it for textile purpose, we almost need no fertilizer. So it could be a little slurry or something from pig for cows. So it's a very sustainable crop in many respects, and you can use the whole plant. And what you also maybe are very interesting in it, can you also use the seeds, and they are very healthy for a lot of food purposes, and which is well known, and that's due to the quality of the amino acids content they have. So for instance, for protein are very good to utilize, but also for the oils, they are also high quality of the acid oils you have in it. And then you also have, which they use very much in Europe, that's why the area with hemp has increased very much actually over the years, but it's not a big crop yet. But still it has increased, and that's due to the content of CBD, cannabidiol, which is you can use in the medical industry for instance. It has been approved for some purposes there. And then there are also this THC, which some utilize, and they have also been able to do that in Denmark, but not so much. But there have been a big interest in that. But that's that's from the top and from the flowers and from not the seeds, but it's for food, then it's the seeds. And then you need to mature the hemp if you need to go for the seed production. So you have some special varieties which are not very high, and also you could say when you harvest the seeds, you can do that, but then you can also say, can we utilize some of the leaf material for these CBD purposes? So there are many possibilities there. The fiber varieties, they are very tall. They're typical, you could say 2.5 meter long. But as I said, for textile, there we go in and try not to make them too high. And that's due to our way of harvesting it, where we have invented this harvester where you can paralyze the stems when you harvest them. And that's due to that you later on can make yarn and spin it and so on. So there are many processes in this textile value chain. So very many exciting projects I'm involved in as also project leader, manager of them. So I regard hemp, you could say there is also this, this inner stem we called sheaves or hemp core. There's very much interesting in that, because if you look at 1 hectare, you could, if you have these fiber qualities where you really want a lot of biomass, you could easily come up to that you have maybe 12 tons dry matter. That's quite a lot. I don't know if it could be in Iceland. But then, but also in Sweden and also even Finland, you have some growing of hemp. But else it's very much, you could say, Southern Europe. But if you look at the sheaves, that's approximately 70% of the crop. If you just look at the stem, and if you have the seeds, then it's another variety. So you have a fiber about 25-30% for fiber purposes, and this inner stem is very good for building material, because it's you could make they call it hempcrete, but it's light as a light beton. What is it? Beton is
concrete.
Concrete, yes, that's so you can make. There are some I cooperate with many in Europe and is in a big network there, and there they sometimes make big elements, so you can build, like you also do in the traditional building industry, these big building elements of with hempcrete. They can build the house rather fast. And since the energy with concrete is very heavy for climate, you could say not good for the carbon accounting or carbon footprint, then there's a lot of interest actually on also some who try to see, can we start something up in Denmark, which is going on at the moment. And there I see some big possibilities, because here you don't have the big demand which you would have for textile production. But you could say, if we could make some, for instance, insulation on other stuff you could use the fibers for, then you can also use the hempcrete for that. What they do today, a lot of it, they actually get quite good prices for the hemp core. That's because they use it for horse bedding. And that's the main utilization today. But the thing is, with using for building materials, comes more and more, and is much, is really, you could say, at the times now, because we want to make the building industry much more sustainable, like we want the textile industry, and you could say a lot of things. And here you actually have really these good purposes with hemp. And then it's an annual crop, and if you are a farmer, you would have a lot of benefit the year after. You can even have hemp and hemp and hemp several years. That's actually not a problem. But if you have in a rotation, you get this benefit if you have grain after the year after. So there, you really have so many advantages with hemp. And actually now I'm involved also in a smaller project which look at the tannins in the top, because it might also have a positive effect on when you use it as feed for cows, so they have less emission, which is damaging the climate. If that can come true to any commercial thing, I don't know. But right now I think there are commercial products, and But the reason why we don't have many hectares, you could say, in Denmark on this yet, that is that we don't have the processing plant here. So it's with cooperative partners. It's going to, for instance, the Netherlands, the largest hemp grower in Denmark, Jan Hegelund. I just spoke with him here today. He's involved in many of my projects also, but he sells some of his crop for fibers processing in Holland, and that's because we don't have it yet. But we are looking into if it could be more processing plants. But we have, as I mentioned in the beginning, as this where you can process them for all these products with fiber mats, and that's rather unique because you don't have. You have it also other words, but then it's another process where they card it and make carded fiber mats, and also for the car industry in Germany and France. But in Denmark here we can do it with this cafting process. Yeah. So there are many possibilities.
You're a great speaker. Okay, should we have questions?
I think we should go out and look at some
I
hemp.
have one question.
Yeah. You're welcome.
We can actually chat outside.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But can we?
So you could say I have actually been in charge of a lot of this development. So I always get all these many contacts with people who contact, and that's yeah.
Not only that, you have been in charge of that in 30 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, you could say actually hemp started in it was allowed to grow from 98, so before the years before, but it was with flax. But I actually also worked where we process it for paper pulp, because it has high qualities also, and that is if you want to strengthen for some purposes. But you all the time have to find out where can you go. We can make a lot in the lab, and but if it needs to be scaled up, you have to find your cooperative partners, like we do with the production where they make shives for bedding and construction, and fibers for carded mats.
What is it that hemp cannot fit in?
Well, what I remember once, curiosity, I applied for an application. I have had really research projects. That's also why it has could keep on going, and that's together with these partners like I mentioned, Advanced Nonwoven and Convert and all these, and also the hemp growers. But they said, oh, it takes up food. That's why I got 25 years ago a rejection of an application, and but that stopped. And then, but you can use it also for food. But you could say if you have a variety where you use it for food, then you don't have this big biomass for all the other things. So you have to choose. And also the way you grow it, if you go for food, you would have to use these cultivation methods. So there would be plants, whatever purpose you do. But that we have on the internet with my cultivation plants. They are there on Landbrugsinfo.
Actually, you told us that you can grow hemp. You told us that you can grow up hemp for a few summers and then grow another vegetable or something.
Yeah. It's a very good rotation crop, and that's due to that the roots go very long. So they're very deep. So it's really it's a very good crop, and they know it. And also I think you know some places where they grow. For Møllerup brands, which is now part of Danish Agrodava company, there they grow and have farmers who are specialized in growing seed for all these food and cosmetics purposes. And they have really taken up the work and commercialized that, and actually been ongoing for several years. But they also, if they start telling the story, which is the one who owns, and Sophie Gamborg, she always liked to tell the story that she contacted me when she took her education. So that's actually how it started with hemp. But another funny story is that since I live in this local area here, I met them when we had children together at school, and the owner of Møllerup, her husband, Stig Gamborg, I once talked with him and said, I think you should see some of these things I do with hemp. And that was actually how they said, okay, we want to go for this. And that was back, I think, in 2005. So they have invested very much. And in Convert, another company which is very global, textile company called Kvadrat, they have invested very much in Convert. And that's because they can process all this textile waste. So you can see from that I have this pilot plant at my research farm with fibers and also with mat forming. For insulation purposes, it has really expanded. So if not, I'm got rich of it, then I can say I have the pleasure that it has expanded so much. So I like the story.
I would like to ask you, maybe outside, of the future potential here in Denmark, Scandinavia, especially in Iceland. What's your opinion on that? Maybe I can ask you here and again there, so you can prepare.
I guess I should know more about Iceland for the first, because actually I'm agronomist also, so I first think of what are the conditions for you can grow hemp, because you have varieties that don't lead this long season, but you also have a very short season. But I know in Finland they can grow with very good results. They can grow hemp and has done that also actually for textile purposes formerly. And when you could say a lot of these industries stopped, that's because they got old-fashioned and was phased out, because we had a lot of that. And in Denmark we had hemp and we used it for rope. I mean, it was law. If you look at old books and history, it was in the ship industry. They were completely dependent. You had law, we should have so and so much areas with hemp. So it was urgent for a nation like Denmark, Iceland. We were together in this strong ship industry, and you could go 1,000 years back actually for this. So that was hemp they made for all these rope.
What happened?
Yeah, we still can make. They still, I think, have some production of rope where they get fibers from outside, which is not Danish produced anymore. I think they when they found out about problems because they didn't have varieties without THC. That's what they are now. All our industrial varieties, they have very low, so that's why we can grow them. It's 0.2%. That's also part of the story. So that's why hemp has come up again. And it was banned in the 60s and then came first in 98. So, and that was Folketinget, our parliament, who listened to big interest for this. So.
Folketinget, det er social.
Yeah. The parliament, Danish parliament.
Oh, okay, the political party.
Yeah, no, not with the party. It's Folketinget, that's the Danish for the parliament. Yes.
CO2.
Yes.
Something about that?
Yes, that's why the story is so good. Because, for instance, when I got actually a very big project I have with funds from Innovation Foundation, Danish Innovation Foundation, I got, when I say I, it's together with partners and university also, we got 10 million Danish kroner for 4 years, maybe even more. Was it 13? Anyway, but this textile project was running 4 years and has run 2 now. And that's also due to the story you have a crop where you have this potential with high yields. So you actually produce much more than, for instance, if you look at cotton. We can't grow cotton in Denmark, but if you look at the third world where elsewhere they grow cotton. But you use very much pesticides, and 25% of the total world use of pesticides, that is for the textile industry, for growing cotton. And that's because they have so much pests after them. So that's why they are also, you could say, the story also, when you have very high yields, you don't add very much fertilizer, you use not very much input, you get a very good CO2 record. So it's, you could say your climate story is very good. So that's also why they look at it as a very sustainable crop. And you could say another story also, that is when you make this, or if you made textile from it, it lasts longer, but you could chop it up again and make new products. And if you go back in history, you could find flax and hemp like textile that have lasted for so long. So they have this, that you could reuse them, and you can use them as in-force when you make other products. So yeah, it's hard to tell bad stories about hemp except for the abuse of it. But that's not for the industrial part, so I'm completely out of that.
Is it stronger than plastic then?
Yes, it is. As you use it for enforcement of plastic. And so I have been involved in many also where we try to use bioplast. We have the binding of this, there you add a little fiber, but you can use, for instance, some decomposable PLA, for example, to bind it. And since they have these long fibers compared to wood fibers, you need very little when you make these products. So it's, yeah, there are many advantages in most applications. And the thing is, I think it's so important that we in Denmark get investment for a processing unit. So we have a possibility to make contracts with farmers to be part of that. So you can sometimes think that we should go more for investors.
When you're making this, is there any other materials than hemp that you use in it?
Yeah, as I said, we use a binder, which could be a PLA, but it could also be a not decomposable binder. We can use polypropylene and polyethylene or whatever. So there you have that, but you can still reuse it all the time. If you put this in and shorten it, and they have it convert equipment so they can easily chop it down again and form it for new applications.
Also, it can be compost.
Yeah, but then it needs to be a PLA you use, which on the long run is decomposable. So don't, yeah. But you could say, if you look at, and this is actually for composites, but I could make one where it's for insulation. You replace mineral wool. That's what you have to deliver on a deposit. Here you can use it many times. You can also you can burn it and get heat in the end of the story.
Andreas told us in Sweden that it's for the isolation purpose. It won't burn. You can.
Yeah, but then you often have. I have worked very much with insulation, and also where you could use it for sound, as acoustic purposes and all this. But I think you add if it has a demand for some. Normally in Denmark, our regulation, if it's inside and you're not in contact with it, you don't have to have it impregnated with fiber retardants. But else you can do that. If you have some construction where it's an open, for instance on the attic or something, you can add fire retardants. And they have that equipment, and I worked a lot with fire retardants of these fiber mats. at convert. So that's possible. It goes a little bit more. But compared to in Denmark, there is a lot where you use you blow in recycled paper for insulation as powder or very short. And there you add quite a lot of fire retardants, but you also add that it will not rotten. And they have a hard time sometimes go out from borax, which is not a go because it's not environmental good to use. That has been some of it what they use formerly. So here in hemp fiber, I think I mentioned you can find textile which are so completely old, but it doesn't decompose, rotten. So you can, if I have it out in my as a growth mat, it would slowly decompose, but it will not rotten. So when you use it as insulation, you don't have to add anything to that it should rotten or something, if it was wet. So, but you do that when you blow in insulation material. There you have something that it will not rotten and it will not burn.
No. One other question. They used hemp for building cars and airplanes.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
Yeah, but it is a very, very strong fiber. So that's the reason. And here we could also use this for a lot of the car composites where you use, but you can also have where you card it, where you can get even stronger, because here we have shortened the fibers. They're very strong still. But if you get fibers when they're even longer, you get a lot stronger. And that you also can, if you card it, then you can make a composite where you really have a strong, for instance, for airplanes. And they work with that. And there have been a lot of Audi, I know, and several cars, they work with hemp as a reinforcement and replacing of plastic.
And compared to carbon fiber?
Yeah, I don't know if some of them say it's just as strong. Normally, carbon fiber is very strong. But
I was hoping for the best answer. Hemp is best.
Yeah. Yeah, here I can show some example for where we have just it's this mat. You press, and here we have used PLA in, and you make this little thing. We haven't finished it. You could say we could make it fine here, and then you could put maybe paint it with clear and something. But you could see very strong, and yeah, it can be anything. So it could be for tables, it could be for everything, and furnitures. And we work with 3D furnitures also in a very interesting project. And well, I don't know what's been into here. But you could see, if you look at this, you can see some dark or something is very light. And that is due to this I mentioned earlier, the redding, the degree of redding. So sometimes the hemp has been longer time outside in the field and redded, and sometimes shorter time. And what we look into in the textile project, as I said, we try to make a controlled redding. We use enzymes, and we use also steam to do it. It costs, of course, a little bit more, and then you have to find out, well, should we rely on the redding in the field? But it is difficult to make it very even for year to year and from field to field. So that's why it's interesting. Could you make a process which even the redding? So.
You said steam.
Yeah.
Should we produce it in Iceland?
Yeah, that's the point. Ah, there we go.
Jeg fik jo også samtidig en lille bit kage. Det er fantastisk. Hun er lige blevet færdig. Hun har sidste dag på job.
Nej, for helvede, jeg kørte for tidligt.
Det er jo næste gang.
Det var næste gang.
Her har jeg stået.
The hemp field here, that's Filina. variety, and it's a textile at a fiber quality, and you can see it's not 3 meters tall. You can see here how tall it is. This one is a little. I would have liked them mainly to be in that size, around 180. This is higher, so a few of them a little higher. And this is the one containing seeds actually also. They're little. When you go for textile, our harvesting system is that we want them harvested so they are parallel. And that's we have a system where we can chop off the top where you have all the seeds, and then you collect that separately, and then you have the stem parallelized, and that's you could say the first harvester actually for textile production. That's in our project with the hemp grower Jørgen Hækkelund near Køge, not so far from Copenhagen, where he has his fields, and he's really a hemp pioneer. So we have this harvester so we can harvest them for textile. And the funny thing about hemp, you could say here you have all the top and seeds. If you had a variety for seed, you would have one where it was mature now. But this hemp field, it's another variety, and it was first established, or we sow we were, I think, in the middle of June actually. It was rather late for different reasons. But what the thing is about hemp, that is that you have this hemp core inside, you can see here, and then you have the fiber. You could say they are outside. But now they're a little difficult to get off. That's because it hasn't redded. So when you red it, microorganisms, they start helping eating some pectins that holds it together, also the fibers together. Because in these bundles, it's fiber bundles, there you can get very thin, fine fibers that you can make spin yarn of, but that creates some processes. So now we will chop off the top, and then we have the stems where they would change color due to when you have heat and water. We are a little late this year, but anyway. But in New Zealand we have harvested the hemp, and it's ready for collection. And there you use a special baler, which we have to get from Holland at the moment, because we don't have a commercial production yet of textile hemp. But you could see this fibers, now we try to use them for textile and process it in that way, but else we could have used it for these fiber mats or for other purposes, and you could use the stem here for all this bedding, for horses especially, but also chicken and so on. Or you could use it for construction. And you could say it's a very strong, this one, the shive or the core. So here we really have possibilities. If we look into the field, when you grow for textile, you can see there are very many plants, and we want thin plants. So if you look into it, sometimes you could find hemp that are so thick, but these, we want them thin. This is okay. And you can see inside there are no room for weed. So you have a completely clean field without weed, and that is due to that they grow so fast, and they cover the ground, so weed can't compete. So if you don't sow it right when you could say the soil is ready for it to a fast germination and growing, then you could get trouble with with weed. But not when you grow it correctly. Then you have no trouble at all.
Spørgsmål? Ja, det er så klart.
Og det er jo altså, det
Yeah.
handler om at så det på det rigtige tidspunkt,
Yeah.
så den kommer op og skygger ukrudten væk.
Yeah. I could add a little bit. All these where you see there have been flowers and now you have seed. You could say these there would be some CBD in this top, which you could utilize and other valuable things. But you see here the male, but there are not very many male plants here. But that's a male plant, and here you have all the women. So it's where it's female and male plants, and you want mainly the female plants, but there will always be a few of these. They also have fiber quality, so it's not so a big problem in this. But if you go for seed production, you don't want too many of the males. But sometimes you could have this what is called bestøvning, where you with pollen you can add and get maybe stronger.
How can you control it?
Yeah, that's the ones. There would always be male plants in, but sometimes they can have very many. That's something for the breeder who raise the variety. So they have to select so they don't get too much of that.
How can they do that?
Well, you ask one. There is one who actually is breeder of a seed variety called Finola, which is not this one. This is Felina. He would be specialist in it, and he is Jace Callaghan, he's called, and he is in Finland. So that's why we also know that they can grow hemp in Finland.
Another visit.
So maybe also Iceland. Yeah, but you can see if you have your the other.
The drone.
Ja,
Can you,
må det ikke det er godt nu?
det går mega godt. Kan du